Good afternoon or late morning, depending on where you are. I'm Janet Peters, and I'm co-presenting today with Gayl Bowser. We are talking about taking AT along to colleges and universities. I work for the Great Lakes ADA Center, which is part of the ADA National Network. The ADA centers nationally are funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, Rehabilitation Research. And we, as the center, serve all of the United States with technical assistance on the Americans with Disabilities Act. My region is in the Great Lakes area, which is Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin. I'm the technology assistant. Everybody can hear me, right? Someone said they're not hearing me, so I'll wait for just a little confirmation that I'm being heard.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Okay, so people are hearing me. Fantastic, thank you. It's always a little weird in webinar land to be talking and then realize, oh, I'm talking to myself. But thank you. I'm being heard. So what I do with the Great Lakes ADA Center is I am a project coordinator on assistive and educational technology. And so that's a little bit about who I am and what we're talking about today with postsecondary assistive technology, which is why I'm interested in that. Before we jump into the core of our presentation, Gayl and I wanted to lay the groundwork for the keys to success in postsecondary, because we keep these in mind with the QIAT-PS project and the work we do with transition and assistive technology. The attitude and self-advocacy skills of students with disabilities are two of the most important factors in determining success or failure in postsecondary education. Students with disabilities need to be prepared to work collaboratively with the institution, and the institutions vary with their level of expertise in assistive technology or disabilities in general. So as we're presenting today, we like to keep this as a foundational understanding that the student in postsecondary has to take a lot of responsibility, more than the K-12 environment, for their self-advocacy and their AP skills, and it takes a lot of preparation. So that's really the foundation of the project and kind of looking at students in postsecondary with assistive technology. With that, I will turn it over to Gayl, who will also introduce herself and tell you who she is as well.
Hi, I'm Gayl Bowser. Today I work as an independent consultant in the area of technology for people with disabilities, but prior to this I was the assistive technology specialist for the state of Oregon, and I also, in terms of my credentials, I am on the QIAT leadership team. Some of you may have participated in a webinar series we did last year about the quality indicators for assistive technology. Actually, some of the work that we're going to talk about today is a derivative of that work, which was focused on the K-12 educational environment. Today we're talking about higher education and the state of higher education in terms of assistive technology. So you can see on this slide that what we know about higher education is that about 11% of undergraduates have a disability, over 2 million students in the United States. And the highest number of those students have what we might call hidden disabilities, like learning disabilities, ADHD, and sometimes autism and psychiatric disabilities. And those students are often capable and interested in going to college. Students with disabilities are attending post-secondary education at rates similar to their non-disabled peers. The problem we've been seeing is that only 34% of those students who start a four-year degree finish a four-year degree in 8 years. So what we know from research and from national reporting is that only a portion of the students who go on to colleges and universities finish their degrees, and it takes that group twice as long to finish. We asked the question early on in the QIAT-PS project about whether or not the low graduation rates raise the possibility of inadequate or inappropriate supports and services. And we were particularly looking at the role assistive technology plays in colleges and university programs for students with disabilities. We completed a survey, and you can see the citation at the bottom of the slide here. We completed it once at an earlier time and most recently in June of last year, where we asked students how important their assistive technology was in being successful in their educational programs. And you see that over half said it was very important. 56% said their assistive technology was very important in completing their college work. And the ones who didn't say it was very important, 32% said it was somewhat important. So only a very small number, less than 10%, thought that assistive technology didn't have some level of importance in their college program. Another question we asked that I think is pertinent for those of you who are working in a K-12 environment was the question of, did you keep the same technology during your transition process? So did you keep the same technology you used in your high school program when you moved on to post-secondary education? About a third said yes. About a third said no, which means that they moved to some other kind of technology. And then about a third said it wasn't applicable, and in most cases that was students who did not use assistive technology in high school at all. And one of the things that is probably important to say about this survey is this was a survey of college and university students who use assistive technology in their post-secondary programs. So I think this has important implications for preparing students to use assistive technology in a college and university setting. One thing we know is that about a third of our students who leave us and go on to college, if they have disabilities, will go without the use of any assistive technology, and they may be introduced to that assistive technology when they get to their college program. It's often introduced through Office of Disabled Student Services, whatever that is called at your post-secondary setting. Another implication of this pie chart is that about 30% of the students who go on to post-secondary settings will probably have to change the technology they use as they move on to a new educational environment. So I think in terms of those of us who work primarily in K-12 settings, one of the implications about this is that we need to teach our students to be nimble, to be able to describe the features that they need in their assistive technology, and not be stuck on one particular aspect of assistive technology. Now, I should probably say that in our next webinar, which is next week on the 14th, we'll be talking very specifically about other implications that we found from this survey and from our work with students at the college and university level. In this webinar, we're going to focus on those services that are provided by Offices of Disabled Student Services. So, but we wanted to talk about the students themselves because of the bar chart that you see here, and another way to illustrate some of those implications that I talked about earlier. You can see that before preschool or before they entered any kind of a school program, only about 10% of students use assistive technology, and you can see a very steady progression of assistive technology use from preschool to elementary to middle school to high school. But one of the things I think that surprised me as we did this survey of post-secondary students using AT was the enormous jump in the use of assistive technology at the post-secondary setting. So for those of us working with middle school and high school students, I think we need to be aware of this data, think more about which of our students might benefit from the use of assistive technology in a post-secondary setting if that's where they're headed. And also know that our students may need to change the technology they use, so they need to be able to really describe what assistive technology does for them. We did the survey twice. We did it in 2009 and we did it again in 2015. So we saw trends in the data. The data we've shown you so far was really data about the 2015 survey because that's the most up-to-date data. But we saw that our post-secondary students are coming to colleges with more awareness of assistive technology. They're using more diverse technology and more universally designed technology. They're using more complex systems. And one of the things that we were excited to see is that there's a great deal more technology available, accessible technology available in colleges and universities in that 6-year period between the two surveys. The training they're getting is more positive. The acceptance by campus faculty is more positive. And more schools have adopted a platform that they suggest students use. It used to be that many of our colleges and universities were just accepting whatever technology a student walked in with. And while that can be really good for the student, they've discovered that if they adopt a particular platform, like they say, we're going to only use Kurzweil, or we're only going to use Read and Write Gold for our written and scan-to-read access, what that allows colleges and universities to do is have more consistent support services. So we see very positive trends in what's happening in colleges and universities for our students who use assistive technology. Janet's going to talk now a little bit about what we did with the information that we got from this initial survey in 2009 and the impact that we hope we're having now that the project is in full swing. So your turn, Janet.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gayl. Yes, as Gayl said, we did both a 2009 and a 2015 nationwide survey of students using assistive technology in higher education, as well as we hosted listening events and other professional lit reviews and really looked at this question about assistive technology in the post-secondary environment. And from that, the Great Lakes and the Southwest ADA Center, with tons of collaboration, I want to say that it was definitely bigger than our centers, collaborating to create this project, which is called the Quality Indicators for Assistive Technology in Post-Secondary Education. The reason we focused on quality indicators as a way to measure and really try to capture what was happening with this and improve, ultimately, outcomes for students around assistive technology and post-secondary is really because quality indicators have been successful as a measurement tool with assistive technology in the past. And Gayl alluded to the QIAT project that she's on the leadership team for, which was created in response when IDEA added the requirement for considering assistive technology. And school districts nationwide had a learning curve on that of like what does it even mean, this is in K-12, to offer quality services around assistive technology. That grassroots effort that has now culminated in a book and really set the standard for assistive technology in K-12. The reason we went with that model is because quality indicators have been so successful as a way to improve services in K-12. So we took that concept and tried to apply it to post-secondary environments. And so and worked very closely with the K-12 QIAT team and people. We created one tool first called the Campus Self-Evaluation Matrix, which I'll get into, and we have another one that we're working on right now. And we really were looking at this as a focused effort of improving assistive technology in post-secondary. And so part of that was working with the campus environment, the Disability Service Office, which has different names at different campuses, but essentially where people go to get their accommodations, as the law says with the ADA in Section 504 of the Rehab Act. The campuses were, varying with that. So we created a tool, and I'm going to come back to the website once I talk about this tool. So remember this slide for later. The tool we created was the Campus Self-Evaluation Matrix, really, again, based on the QIAT K-12, but we learned very early on that there are some significant differences in the post-secondary world versus the K-12 world. To test our tool and the resources we had created for QIAT-PS, we did, in the last 5 years, we worked with specific schools to do a pilot study of using the campus tool to measure their assistive technology service delivery. So these are some of the schools that we worked with nationwide, both with the Southwest ADA Center, and Gayl has been very involved as a consultant with us in the project as well. So we did get a good mix of diversity. If you look at the colleges that post-secondary institutions that participated, we have some very large institutions, University of Arkansas, University of Wisconsin. These are large multi-campus state-run institutions. We have community college systems as well as small liberal arts, smaller colleges. So it really gave us good feedback on where and how the tool works most effectively, and it really does work across a wide range of different campus types. Works best when there's of course commitment for self-improvement. Ultimately, the tool we created is a self-assessment and a self-improvement tool. So places that it doesn't work well is when they don't have the interest in self-improvement on it. So what all of these institutions you see in the pilot study, one major thing they did have in common is they really wanted to look at what they were doing around assistive technology and improve that service delivery. And so I would say that's the underlying takeaway, is that a self-improvement tool works great if you really want to go there. So we're going to dive into a little bit later all of the indicators and the actual quality indicator statements around assistive technology. But there are 25 this is a graph of Augsburg College, which is a local liberal arts college here in Minneapolis. And they were one of the first pilot sites that we worked with. And they continue to use the tool as a snapshot of where they're at with their service delivery around assistive technology and make goals with that. So you can see here in this chart, the different colors are years of taking the self-assessment, and that you can see things that it's a great way to show improvement for a school to work with administrators, really to say we need a budget and we need to prioritize assistive technology. Schools use the matrix to do just what Augsburg did, to really take a snapshot in time of where they were at with their service delivery. They used that for accreditation. They used it to many times to work with larger campus initiatives, such as if a campus was having a diversity initiative or an accessible IT push. They use this to target areas of need and really focus in and make improvement. And what was kind of surprising, if you are in the K-12 world, as I was prior to working with Great Lakes, is that there's such diversity among colleges on how they do their assistive technology. And so there's not very many tools. There's not as many as in K-12 on data collection or really kind of that evaluation process of assistive technology. So this was a useful way for schools to start to document, that assistive technology process in more than an anecdotal way, because certainly the surveys we did suggested this, the research literature out there suggested any kind of anecdotal stories really say assistive technology is very important to success for students in post-secondary, but many campuses they don't have a really good way of documenting that need in a data format. So the tool is useful for that. So the tool itself is an accessible, you have the indicator statement, and then you have a self-matrix of 1 being very novice and then 5 being more expert. So I'm going to go to the website to show you what that looks like. All right. So hopefully you can all now see. It says I'm sharing my desktop. It's always
right there.
Oh, thank you, Gayl, for the feedback. So the QIAT website, I'll just go to the main site, is broke down for schools and for students. Next week when we do the webinar, we'll talk more in depth about the student tool. And just to point out quickly before I show you the matrix, the resources page has those surveys that Gayl talked about. So you can download those and look at the raw data closer if you would like. It also has articles we've written for Closing the Gap and the K-12 Quality Indicator Project right here as well. So if you create an account, then you have access to our campus self-evaluation matrix. And campuses can fill this out online. This is an accessible tool that you're able to self-rate yourself. We also have a PDF print version if you want to do it via paper. Sometimes that's more convenient for people. And essentially, we have the indicator areas. We're looking at awareness and eligibility. And we always recommend doing this as a group because really those conversations between staff in a disability service office, or including many groups in our pilot study included the disability service office as the lead, but had people from IT or library or other campus departments participating. And that's where the valuable information comes, is those conversations about, wow, how are we doing on disseminating promotional materials? and you'll find people have very different viewpoints on what's really happening. So there's 5 indicators per area, and then you rank yourself, and you can add any comments here. So when you've completed a matrix, you can view your matrix and get a visual of how you've done, so you can see any comments you had, your responses, and the indicator statement. You can also print this information. This is new, so we're adding some features to our website where when a campus completes a self-evaluation matrix, they can also do an action plan for each matrix. So you think of the matrix as a snapshot in time of how you're doing. And I'm using Augsburg's account right now because they have good data. So Augsburg does this as an annual review. They can have an actual action plan each year connected to how they're doing. And it will show their rating for the indicator and then what their goal is for that year. And then you can get reminders from the system on that. So this tool is new, but the information is up there to be able to do the matrix tools right now and is available to everyone. So that's a little bit about how the website works and the pilot study of the campus self-evaluation matrix. I'm going to turn it over to Gayl now to dive into deeper and what the quality indicators actually say and what we're trying to get campuses to self-evaluate.
So as Janet said, we ended up with 5 indicator areas, and you can see them listed here on this slide. We wanted to mention that these indicators started out, when we first started working with these, we thought that we could use the K-12 quality indicators as a basis for the work that we were doing. But what we saw over and over again as we worked through these indicators and the areas was that we had really a different set of services at the college and university level because of the nature of students at the college and university levels. The K-12 students have schools have mandates to make sure that they have the assistive technology they need. They have mandates to make a plan for the use of that assistive technology. But at the post-secondary level, much more responsibility is placed on the student and the student's identification of the kinds of services they need. So what you'll see in this list, and I'm actually going to go to the next slide where you can see a description of each indicator area. What you'll see in the list of indicator areas is that there's much more of a focus on getting information to students so that they can use it in the ways that they feel is most important. So awareness and eligibility is making sure that the Disabled Student Service Office shares information about what they do so that students who might need that support know where to get it and how to acquire the AT and the AT supports that they need. Planning and implementation is about helping students explore, plan, use their assistive technology, and also looking at what it is your program does in order to follow up on those plans and make sure they're implemented, or find out if what you're recommending is actually implemented. Evaluation of effectiveness, again, a look at whether or not your AT services are useful for your population that you're serving. And then administrative support and professional development. Let's take a look at each indicator area separately. So this is the area of awareness and eligibility. And as Janet said, there are 5 indicators in each area. So in terms of things that institutions do to make sure that people know about their services and make sure that students who are eligible for services from the Student Support Office get those services, that kind of thing is included in this list of indicators. So development of promotional materials and making sure that in all aspects of campus life, students are aware that there are places they can go for help. And this is not only just for assistive technology services, but also for the Disabled Student Services Office itself. One of the aha moments for a couple of the schools that I worked with was one where they, in the discussion when they were doing the self-evaluation matrix and using that 1 to 5 scale, they said, you know, we have all these services and we do all this work, but we don't actually tell anybody in the new student orientation process that we provide assistive technology. So they, it was not a real difficult action to take, but one that made an enormous difference in how they approached their assistive technology services and how many students used assistive technology services. The same kind of thing in written descriptions and guidelines, talking about the use of assistive technology rather than just the eligibility guidelines as a way to get into the service system. Excuse me, I got a nasty cough. Again, simple actions could be taken. One office simply added 2 or 3 questions about assistive technology to their intake interview, and they began to see which students were coming in with assistive technology that needed to be supported, or that those students needed their assistive technology support provided, and but also in-house referral for AT services. So students who came in without assistive technology, and we know that's about 30% from our survey results, those students might actually benefit from assistive technology. So intake questions, accessible IT. In the right-hand column, you can see the actual indicators themselves, and then as Janet showed you on the live website, you have the ability to rate your services 1 to 5 on that website and create a report that gives you your self-rating. What we wanted to do today, though, was talk about just a couple examples of what people did, what schools did, when they identified areas in the awareness and eligibility section of the self-evaluation that they wanted to focus on or address. So here's just some examples of things that were done by some of the schools in our pilot sites. They created social media sites. They recognized that their website was probably not the place that students were going to go first. So they created different social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, all kinds of sites like that. And also worked to follow the assistive technology companies and repost their posts to help students stay on top of updates and news about assistive technology. So while the campus programs were responsible to make sure that their students had information about their assistive technology, again, that there's a major shift at the college level so that the students themselves need to take responsibility for how they're going to use that information. Another campus, just in order to build awareness for eligible students, offered a monthly drop-in time for students where they opened up their assistive technology lab, opened up all their different kinds of devices, and let students drop in to try out things that's available to them. My niece actually did that. She went to college having had an IEP in high school, but also as a straight A student. And when she went to college, she decided that she was not going to have a disability anymore. And so she did not take advantage initially of the Disabled Student Services offices. But as she started to run into some organizational issues and particularly some note-taking problems in her college classes, she eventually did find her way to the disabled student supports that were offered on her campus, and they introduced her to some assistive technology that she had not seen in high school, and she now uses it on a daily basis, having graduated from college and moved on to employment. So those kinds of things were actions that campuses took in order to improve their services and make sure that their students with disabilities were aware of their assistive technology services and also the assistive technology they might need. Another area in the QIAT-PS indicators is planning and implementation. This includes identifying a need for accommodations, so particularly for those students who hadn't come to the campus with accommodations that included assistive technology, working with those students to identify what accommodations they needed, monitoring their performance as those new accommodations were provided, because students did not necessarily know how to include assistive technology in their daily routines and activities. So helping them get going, doing some regular counseling to find out how the assistive technology was working and seeing if they could do troubleshooting about that assistive technology. Also, we found many disability service offices who were less involved in helping students use the assistive technology that they brought to the school itself. So they took actions to help students who came with assistive technology to use their assistive technology more effectively, but also to make sure that everybody at the university level knew what those students were doing, what the accommodations were, and so including assistive technology in the accommodation letter that goes to most instructors at the postsecondary level. And then developing actions to facilitate problem solving when those things didn't work. Here's a couple examples of actions that campuses took to make sure that planning and implementation was effective. Some of them created a resource for students about assistive technology, so a document that was specifically targeted at the people who would be using assistive technology in the school to talk about what assistive technology is, what their rights were on campus, what things they could and could not ask for in terms of accommodations, and could and could not ask for in terms of asking their professors for accommodations. Campuses also took a lot of actions to ensure that students were an integral part of the AT decision-making process. By spending time talking with students about their AT needs and experiences, some of that stuff from the awareness and eligibility section that I mentioned earlier about including AT in the interview process and the intake process for student support offices also carried through to the planning and implementation processes, because once students actually left the the support office, then they needed to be able to integrate their assistive technology into their daily routines and activities without one-to-one support. So it became crucial, and many campuses took actions to make sure that their students were involved in the planning process in an increased level than perhaps what they had been doing before. The next area is evaluation of effectiveness. We were surprised to see that many campuses were providing assistive technology services, but really doing less follow-up than maybe we might have anticipated. So this area is about evaluating the effectiveness of the AT for the student, and also evaluating the effectiveness of the actions that the campus program was taking. So the first indicator is making a plan for evaluating the services that you provide and collecting enough data to evaluate how you're doing. Again, Janet mentioned earlier that there's a lot of anecdotal reports about what's working or what's not working, but many campuses began to take actions to look at what happened to the AT that they loaned out. How long did kids keep it? How long did students use it? And were those two amounts of time similar, or did things get checked out and stuck on a shelf someplace without being used? So they wanted to know how they were doing in terms of AT use and review that data to make changes in what you're doing. They were also looking at a campus-wide approach to assistive technology. So most campuses have both individual assistive technology and then accessible technology available in the libraries, in science labs, but, in various locations across the campus. So some campuses took some action to take a look at where they had assistive technology. Was it available in non-academic settings like dorm computers, things like that? And where was their assistive technology available, and how was it used? Some of this data was pretty easy to collect because you could just look at networked versions of software, or look at the campus services as a whole and see where people were using things. Other bits of this data took a little bit more creativity and a little bit more excuse me, I'm sorry for the cough. A little bit more creativity and a little bit more effort to collect it. The final indicator here is that the evaluation results are communicated. So communicated to all the stakeholders in the institution. One of the stories that I remember from some of the pilot studies is that some students, there were places on campus where accessible technology had been provided, but the people who were in charge of the computer lab or the library computers or the technology available around the campus weren't actually informed about the accessibility features. So they had to go back and do some additional professional development. And I think you'll see throughout this set of indicators that they are very much interrelated and overlapping in that way. So results from the communication of your evaluation results has implications for the professional development indicator that we're going to see in just a minute. Here are some actions, ways that people have used the campus self-evaluation. One is, as Janet said, is several colleges are using it on an annual basis to set new goals and to identify the actions that they want to take. And we're very excited about the new feature of being able to create a plan online along with the online version of the campus self-evaluation matrix. They created an electronic survey to solicit feedback from students in their program, and then they used also their exit interviews as students were graduating to find out about their assistive technology services. I see that there's a question. Someone has said most of the activities you described are happening when the students get to their college. Are high school students also using the data and the resources to help students prepare for transition? It's a really good question and has sort of a two-part answer. The first part is that this data is very much a self-evaluation, and campuses at this point are not publicizing the results of their self-evaluation as much as they are taking actions to make sure to improve their assistive technology services. The other answer that is associated with that question is that next week we're going to have a second webinar where we focus entirely on the student self-evaluation matrix that's a companion piece to this one, and really talk about implications for people in the K-12 setting who are helping students who use assistive technology prepare to move on to post-secondary settings. So you may want to join us for that webinar. It would be great to be able to see how campuses evaluated their own services, but what we didn't want to do was have campuses say, oh, we really need to do a lot of improvement and then publicize that. We really wanted to help them make those improvements more than rate them. Although we did have some campuses who were involved in using the self-evaluation matrix as part of their accreditation and improvement planning process at the formal school level. So let's go on to the next area, which is administrative support. We know from all kinds of different ways, from the quality indicators at the K-12 level, from research on the need for administrative support, and lots of anecdotal data, that without support from the school administration, whether that's a K-12 school or a post-secondary educational program, that administrative support plays an enormous role in making sure that assistive technology services are effective. Campus programs evaluated their administrative support in these areas, and then the ones who were successful in making a plan about administrative support and implementing it were able to work closely with their own institutions and in a variety of different ways to make sure that the changes that they were making were maintained over time and were effective at the campus-wide level, not just in the office. Because one of the things we saw is that campuses who were doing outreach and talking to other offices at the university level were much more successful in making sustained and systemic change. So having written procedural guidelines, making sure that people knew about the guidelines for assistive technology was an important factor, and some campuses had no written procedural guidelines, so they looked at models from other schools about how things were done with assistive technology and really built upon those models to make them customized for their own institution. Another area that we saw in the administrative support as an administrative support indicator was a grievance or complaint procedure. Many schools did not have any kind of a procedure for a student who was trying to get the assistive technology services they needed either within the campus program or throughout the campus. And so some schools developed a grievance process so that students could say, hey, I'm not getting the help I need and I need some additional help. Qualified support personnel, making sure that the people who were responsible for assistive technology at any level had the knowledge that they needed. So that, again, applies to the professional development indicator. And also we were surprised to find that many of the programs who participated in the pilot didn't have an actual assistive technology budget in their initial work. And so they, even if they were able to just create a budget line and start to, make some plans about what things needed to be purchased available campus-wide or available within the program itself. That was a big change. So those are the indicator areas. Here's some actions that people did. The first one actually speaks to that budget idea again, but it applies more to leveraging resources from all the programs on campus so that campus programs that were purchasing, say, the science lab software or a language software or something like that would know what accessibility features would be desirable for that kind of application and help to identify the ones that did have those features. Another campus partnered with the administration and the admissions office to develop an accessibility plan for specific events so that when the college began to have events where the publicity needed to be accessible or for instance, materials that were handed out at that event needed to be accessible, they began to work in those ways to collaborate with the colleges. And then again, we've talked already about creating a specific budget. The last area of our 5 areas is professional development and training. The professional development and training indicators primarily focus on making sure that everybody on campus has the level of knowledge that they need about assistive technology in order to make the assistive technology available and accessible to students. So good, high-quality professional development targeted at the particular groups that need to know it, and different groups need to know different kinds of things. So I've already mentioned people who run technology labs, but also all the instructors on a campus need to know their role in making sure that students have the accommodations they need in their classrooms, and professors need to know what their responsibilities are, what what they can ask of the student. And also the 5th indicator here, again, is an outreach indicator that assistive technology professional development is available to a wider institutional audience. Here's some actions that were taken by different campuses in our pilot study about this. So outlining questions for counselors to guide conversations in assistive technology consultations, providing a time for students to try their assistive technology before they use it. So that's loosely professional development, but it is training for sure to let students try things out in a variety of environments, not just in the lab before they check it out, so that they don't check it out and not use it. Also sharing data about AT uses and AT successes in an annual report that's shared with key members of the campus. So letting everybody know how we're doing and where things are going well and where things are excuse me, are not going so well and need improvement. I have one more slide to show you, and that is a handout that will come today with the PowerPoint slides that are distributed after this webinar. We developed a handout that had 2 parts to help people begin to think a little bit about what they were doing and how students were using assistive technology on campus. So this actually gets back to the question about the student focus on assistive technology. This handout has 2 parts. The first part is actions that students can take and questions that students can ask of their college and university settings as they begin to explore locations that provide assistive technology services. The second half of this handout, though, also includes questions that the campus program can ask of students and actions that the campus program can take to make sure that they're promoting high-quality assistive technology services. We'll actually be going into this more in depth next time when we talk about the student self-evaluation matrix. So I'm going to hand it back to Janet to talk about next time.
Thank you, Gayl. Just to let you all know that this is part 1 of a 2-part series for QIAT-PS, and next week, on December 14th, we will be going over the student self-evaluation matrix. So we spent 5 years working with the campus self-evaluation matrix, developing it, doing national work with it, and piloting it with specific schools, and we are in the process right now of a similar endeavor but focused on students. So we'll give you all the details on that. But I wanted to make sure you knew that that's happening next week, and so it will be kind of the part 2 to this session. And here is our contact information for both Gayl and I. And if you are interested in the QIAT-PS project, either just being notified when the website is fully functioning. Right now there's a few glitches. We're just in development right now. Or if you want to be notified of the website or being part of us, of the QIAT-PS collaboration and giving us feedback on the tools, just email Gayl or I, and we will get you on the list, and we will work with you. Yes. Thank you for all of you. I know webinars are sometimes hard to make the time and do it, but we appreciate all of your attention. And echoing Gayl, thank you to AbleNet for allowing us to present our project to you and being part of the AbleNet University, which is such a great resource in the field. And we'll hopefully see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.